Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Nature Education panel hosted by the Sustainable Resource Committee. This is our 2021, our first free talk of the year. We have these every month on the fourth Tuesday of the month. And here's the program for tonight. And my name is Demarus Tevuk, and I'm on the Sustainable Resource Committee. We're going to start with the land acknowledgement. Then we'll do an introduction to the Sustainable Resource Committee. Each of the panelists are going to introduce themselves, and we'd like to keep the introduction to about 5 minutes each. And then we're going to have a question and answer session with the panelists. So while everyone's introducing themselves, if you can think of the questions that you'd like to ask. Once all the introductions are done, we can start with the Q&A session. And then if we've got time and energy, once the discussion is done, we can offer a little bit of social time. So for the land acknowledgement, I'd just like to explain that a land acknowledgement is a way for us to build a relationship with the land. It is also a way for us to recognize ancient relationships that the Coast Salish people have with the land. And land acknowledgements are meant to center us and ground us and help us feel connected to where we live. And I got this image from nativeland.ca. It's a map that's a work in progress. And I like this map because it shows the overlap that exists between tribes. And land acknowledgements are, they're kind of a new thing in the, how do I describe it? In the general public, but they're something that have also been traditionally done here since time immemorial. And both with that same desire to remind us that the land takes care of us and feeds us and supports us, but also to recognize that we are visitors in someone else's homeland. And to just really honor that relationship. When land acknowledgements are done, they should be done genuinely and out of a feeling of love for the land. So I hope I did the land some honor by doing this land acknowledgement. So I'd like to introduce the Sustainable Resource Committee. Today's free talk is hosted by the Sustainable Resource Committee, which is dedicated to promoting sustainable community environments within the greater Snoqualmie Valley that seek to lean forward into the future and not only survive, but thrive. We are committed to relationship building among people and groups, as well as among people and nature. And the work of this committee primarily involves supporting and connecting with farmers, educators in both academic and indigenous cultures, and other like-minded individuals. This free informational talk is part of a series of activities towards our goal of building a sustainable community in the Snoqualmie Valley. And the Sustainable Resource Committee is sponsored by the Baha'i Faith. This is a new slide to introduce that we started putting together a quarterly newsletter. If you've registered for a talk with us in the past, it's something that we're going to start sending out once every 3 months. So hopefully we're inviting you to future talks, and we're also sending out this newsletter once a quarter. So those are the only two things that we will reach out to you about to connect with you. If you would like to share your events, recipes, messages of goodwill to the community, and also if you would like to be a future guest speaker, or if you have an idea for a topic for a future talk, you can email me, Demarus@gmail.com, for newsletter or speaker submissions. Yeah, we're hoping, I think in the next one, we're gonna have recipes, maybe a little more information about native plants. We've got some ideas for the next newsletter. So tonight's panelists, this is the order that we will go in for the introductions. We'll start with Matthew Erwin, then Jason Padvorac. Did I say that right? No, I didn't.
Padvorac. Pretty close.
Okay. Zsofia Pasztor. I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. And then myself, Demarus Tevuk, and then we'll finish with Tom Murdoch. So I think I will stop screen sharing, and Kurosh is going to help us keep time for 5 minutes. So we'll start with Matthew.
Okay, I'm starting my timer. So yeah, I'm Matt Erwin, a lover of all things nature and educating people. I went to Edmonds Community College and got my degree in horticulture. During that time, I met Zsofia Pasztor, who is here, and she kind of insisted that I come work with the kids at an elementary school garden in Everett, Olivia Park Elementary School. And it was the best experience I ever had. After school hours, I'd work with the kids and their families and teach them how to grow food. We'd build hoop houses. It was just amazing. We did we grew mushrooms, we built greenhouses, and it was a really good time in my life. I've always been super passionate about teaching people about nature, and that's kind of my philosophy. This talk is about how to teach people. And I think the only real way to get across your message is by expressing through your emotion and passion for the subject you're talking about. Like when I talk about mushrooms, you can tell how much I truly love mushrooms and the relationship with trees. And it's just difficult to learn if the person that's teaching you does not have an enthusiasm for what they are talking about. So whenever I teach people, whether it's children or adults, I really just act myself, but that comes across as very enthusiastic and passionate. I found that with the kids at the school garden, the more childlike you became and the more excited you got about the tiniest little aspects of gardening, whether it be an insect or mycelium growing through the soil, the kids would get into it. And then the whole planting the seed and a few months later harvesting, and the kids just wanted to eat it. It was really amazing, a great part of my life. Nowadays, I teach foraging and beginner to mushroom identification classes. And during those classes I do out in the field, I still bring the same enthusiasm, that childlike wonder, the ADD mentality, you would say, jumping from one thing to the next, really passionately seeing something for the first time and being able to share it. I've had great feedback with my foraging classes, because it makes a difference when you're passionate. Zsofia was so passionate in her restoration class that I took that I retained so much information, and I find it's easier for people to retain that information through passion and love. in all aspects of nature, whether it's trees, mushrooms. One of my favorite quotes from Emerson is, passion and enthusiasm, well, no, passion rebuilds the world for the youth. It makes all this alive and significant. And I truly believe that. I truly believe that in order for us to make a difference in the future, we have to show children and adults why we are so passionate. One of my biggest passions is proper pruning techniques, and I do a lot of orchard pruning. Lately, this year specifically, I've been doing a lot more of coaching, and I love being able to express to people the physiology of a tree, the reason why it acts the way it does, and just seeing them connect the dots and how it all comes together. And that would be my time.
All right, that wasn't supposed to happen.
Oh, the timer, my timer thing. Oh.
Thank you, Matt. Next we have Jason.
Hi, my name is Jason Padvorac. It's so wonderful to see some familiar faces here and some brand new faces. I'm very grateful to the Sustainable Resources Committee and Demarus specifically for putting this together and bringing us all here. It's such a treat to be here with everybody. I live as a guest in the Coast Salish lands, specifically near the confluence of the Snoqualmie and Skykomish rivers, on the traditional homelands of the Snohomish and Duwamish people. Like Demarus was saying, it's more dynamic than we might see from sharp lines on a map. I grew up with my dad doing organic gardening in the backyard. He'd compost the leaves from the maple tree every year, and we'd feed that to the tomatoes and get great tomatoes, and spent a lot of time out in the woods. And I've always loved plants. So since early on, a lot of my connection has been with nature and food, like the maple tree feeding the gardens, feeding us, eating berries from the forest. I took a little diversion in college and I studied biomedical engineering. So I went way off into this world of technology and a bunch of glass and computers and concrete and stuff. And that's a wonderful thing. Lots of good stuff has come from biomedical technology. A lot of people I care about are here because of that. But as I went down that path, what I found was that the things that can make the most difference to how we live are not the high-tech stuff. It's like, hey, are we eating enough vegetables? Like if you don't eat any vegetables, you're going to need a heck of a lot of biotechnology to stay alive. And if you eat vegetables, you're less likely to need that stuff and more likely to just be healthy. Not that vegetables cure everything, but there's a heck of a lot of things that vegetables can help us prevent. These days, I run a program called Sustenance Northwest, and I teach foraging, gardening, and herbalism, specifically looking for ways to put together like transformed paradigms with really practical skills. And I found that that's the best way for us to connect with nature, because we have so much of our thinking is upside down and backwards. So we have to flip it the right way around. But then if we don't have some really practical way to connect with nature, where we're helping ecosystems and we're getting sustained by them ourselves, if we don't have both of those pieces, it kind of falls apart. So like nettles are a great example. Nettles are a fantastic edible, a wonderful medicine. They're native plants. They grow like crazy here, right? If we plant and tend a nettle patch, and then that is our food and medicine, like that can be a major part of your food during the springtime and a major important medicine. That can heal our bodies and we become physically connected to nature. Nature we see as keeping us alive. And then when we share that with, say, a neighbor or a friend, we're regaining the sense of community where we depend on each other for community. And it becomes this whole eco-social transformation where there's people and there's nature, but we're part of nature, we're part of each other, and it all comes together. For me, finding ways to make those kinds of connections and then send people with something that they can take home is so important for nature education. So we break down the divide. We can't go visit nature and then come back away from nature. Like if we live in a suburban yard with a bunch of concrete and lawns, we are living in nature, right? It's really degraded nature, and we need to work to heal it. And until we heal that, we won't have a connection to nature. If we have to drive somewhere else to get nature, it doesn't work. So that's, for me, when I was thinking about tonight and the concept of connecting with nature, like Demarus, I really love how you framed this evening. That's what was in my heart.
Thank you, Jason. If you're done, I think, yes, next we'd like to have an introduction to Zsofia.
Hello, everybody. I am honored to be here. When Matt invited me, it was an absolute yes, no question. And there are several people here who we go back some long ways. Jason actually is just across the forest from us on the other side of it. Matt and I know each other now 10 years, hard to believe, but it's been 10 years ago. And Tom and I had worked on multiple projects together in the past. We are all helping and working, I really believe, in the same meadow or in the same forest. And that's so beautiful because everybody on this screen represents a very important piece. And all of us working together is what makes this world go around. So I want to thank everybody for what you do. As Matt said, yes, we have been, Farmer Frog has been a baby that sprouted out of a school garden where Matt also worked quite a bit. And Matt for a while, for several years, was one of our board members actually for Farmer Frog. We really focused a lot on schools, and I believe that that is the hardest part right now in this last year season, because we just about turning the clock on the year anniversary for COVID shutdown. We miss the kids. The school gardens are right now on hold. At our headquarters site in Paradise Farm, we don't have a bunch of classes, but what's nice to see is that very small homeschooling groups are actually coming back to have some very defined activities, and that's just, it warms my heart. I love it. So it's so important. We lately have been doing a lot of food distribution, and that's supporting a lot of people. We currently are feeding over 2 million Washingtonians, but not just by ourselves. And to me, that is exactly what building things based on nature means. Nothing ever is in a vacuum in the natural systems. We are always connected, whether it's, as Matt said, the mycelium or the mycelium and the metal relationship. It's been really studied what the difference is even between vegetable and vegetable. When something grows in a community, it tastes better. It has higher nutrient levels, and it's better for us. And that is what this work actually is showing me on a very small and a very large scale, that right now we are partnering with over 700 organizations on a daily basis. But you can also look at it at a very, very small scale and take it down to the bacteria and the virus interacting, and how those nutrients and minerals are absorbed into a plant. Nothing can do it alone. And that is, if I have to really say something that is, to me, transformational when I think of nature, is that when we link arms and when we live with caring about our surroundings and who else is in the room, who else is there with us, that's when we are our best. That's when we are our happiest. And that's when we really can make the greatest impact. So to me, that's what the connection to nature means. And I can't wait for kids to get back into those school gardens. I actually think that COVID was a real big eye opener, and outdoor classrooms will become the thing for quite some time to come. I hope that no kid will ever be tied to a school chair again in a classroom forever. And I think we will see some very good thing coming out of that. So I don't know how many minutes I've been talking now for 5 minutes.
If you're finished, I'd like to thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And now it's my chance to introduce myself. My name is Demarus Tevuk, and I am Inupiaq I was born in Nome, Alaska, but I grew up moving all over the country. But we lived in Alaska until I was about 8. And I like to talk about my childhood because we were outside all the time. And summer days were really long. We would spend, it felt like we were at fish camp all summer as soon as school was out, until one time I went home the night before school started because we didn't realize it was starting the next day. But yeah, I grew up on the tundra, and I guess I just want to explain. I grew up being really aware of the stereotype of the Arctic and subarctic being a place that's desolate and has no food, but it's not like that. And similar to what other people have said today about plants being in community and everything being connected, there's a lot of biodiversity on the tundra. You can, in the one spot, you have mosses and lichens, and then shrubs. They're really small, blueberries, and then what is it? What are they called? Succulents, even. My mom's favorite herb that she would ask me, she taught me at a young age how to identify this plant. And she would, every time we went out to pick greens in the spring, she would ask me to go under the bushes and crawl under the bushes because I was little and find, I think it's called rosewort. That was one of her favorite greens to eat. And she would really praise me for finding it. And I'm sure I'm missing like other plant, like flowers and like other like forbs, like all different kinds of plants are all growing together in the tundra. And it sustains a lot of life. And like I could talk more about that, but I grew up learning how to gather plant material in the spring. And to me, that was a living example of how to live sustainably, because if you over harvest a plant in the Arctic, it's going to die and you won't be able to gather from that plant the next year. You're also really aware of the other animals that need to feed from that same plant. One of the most common green that we would gather is sura. That is it's a willow bud, and ptarmigans eat willow leaves even throughout the year. So if we overharvest, if we take too much, then the birds are going to suffer, and other animals, moose, they're gonna not have as much food. So, but gathering sustainably, it relies a lot on intuition, which I know is not very well valued in Western science. Intuition is not talked about often enough. But what my mother and I would do is, even today, when we gather greens, we pick until we feel like that's as much as this place can give, and then we move on to the next patch. So I like to talk about harvesting plants in Alaska as an example of interacting sustainably with a plant. And I've done a lot of research in traditional ecological knowledge. I call myself an environmental educator because over the last few years, I started teaching classes about native bees, and with the local, the Seattle library system, last 2019 is when I did that series of classes. I also did a little bit of classes about native plants. And I would just point out that you're building a relationship with a plant when you get to know them. And each plant has a personality. And there's, yeah, the ways to know personalities with plants and to know how they're speaking to you. It's I don't think that's talked about enough in Western education either. That and I also want to just kind of point out that the indigenous way of speaking with a plant, I don't want it to sound like touchy-feely or, kind of like new agey or something. Like there's something really grounding with it, that when you notice patterns, that's how it's the plants are talking to you. The health of the plant is what you're looking at. And also when you interact and you harvest, you feel the generosity of the plant giving itself to you. And there's a way to build that relationship with the plant in a good way. I don't know. I didn't really have a plan for what I wanted to talk about today with my introduction, but I mean, I could, if anybody has questions about like what it was like for me growing up in Alaska. The only other thing that I could share is that we spent a lot of time berry picking also. And just the approach for education is a little different with indigenous culture, about how it's a lot more kind of loose and not as structured as some other ways of learning how to interact with plants and noticing patterns. I will say my one of my favorite things about teaching classes is I had a 4-year-old student, and I taught him how to gather, I think it was sheep sorrel, and watching his face as he identified it, watching him notice the pattern of the plant, and it clicked in his head, like watching him go leaf all the way down to the soil was so gratifying to watch him process the information and then get it. And then he picked the leaf and ate it. So that was like one of my favorite things. So I will pass it on to Tom to introduce yourself.
Hi. I also traveled around. I went to 9 elementary schools and 3 high schools when I was growing up. I was a military brat, and unlike a lot of folks are surprised, I learned that my undergraduate degree was actually in political science. And shortly after I graduated, which was back in the late 60s, I wound up going in the military, like a lot of folks did. And I spent 6 years there, and was planning on going to Vietnam. Instead, I wound up becoming an operations officer for a radar surveillance squadron in King Salmon, Alaska, next to the Naknek River. And I literally got hooked on salmon at that location. And then when I left Alaska, I was stationed in McCord, and had the opportunity to leave the military, and then I went to pick up graduate work at the University of Washington in fisheries oceanography and fluvial geomorphology and water law and a whole bunch of other wonderful topics. And from there, I shifted gears and went to work as a water resource planner for Snohomish County's planning department. And I think because of my political science background more than my natural science background, I was selected to be a person to go around and convince the local governments in Southwest Snohomish County and Northwest King County to sign a memorandum of agreement for coordinated surface water planning, which is basically an agreement to agree to talk together and coordinate their surface water planning. And after much machination in the city and county council levels, everybody signed the agreement. But I'm here to tell you that there has been no coordination since then. During that tenure, I decided to figure out a way to get the public involved in managing our rivers and streams. And I hunted for some funds and was able to extract a pot of money out of the EPA to provide small grants and technical assistance to schools and community groups who would be interested in becoming stewards of their local creeks. And out of that evolved the local Snohomish County Adopt a Stream program. And during that period, I was also able to get some extra grant funds from other sources to do things that I wanted to do that I couldn't get from the county planning or public works departments, including hiring a group of folks to do stream restoration projects and to manually map the locations of the majority of the streams and rivers and wetlands in Snohomish County, which became the basis for the county's current GIS system of streams, rivers, and wetlands. And the activities that the schools and community groups got involved in through this locally based Adopt a Stream program were so popular that we started getting inquiries from all over the country. And as a result of that, I figured, well, maybe we should take this thing out of the hands of local government and create something that doesn't really have any political boundaries. And that became the genesis for the Adopt a Stream Foundation. And the mission of the Adopt a Stream Foundation is quite simple. It's to teach people how to be stewards of their watersheds. Where the complexity comes in is that 9 out of 10 visitors that I talk to don't really know that a watershed is that big area of land around a stream that drains to it. And further complicating the matter, less than 1% of the people that I talk to know that a riparian zone is the area of vegetation adjacent to a stream system that affects its ecological health. And so we're to carry out our mission at the Adopt a Stream Foundation. We conduct Streamkeeper Academy classes to all age groups. A week and a half ago, I presented a junior Streamkeeper course to 130 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And quite fun. And I got some notes back from their teachers saying I've turned them all into activists, which I consider a major compliment. But we've recruited a wonderful team of adjunct professors that teach classes there. And Zsofia has actually taught classes there about rain gardens. And our most recent class was John Marsloff with teaching In Search of the Meadowlarks, basically how farming community can coexist with wildlife, with emphasis on birds. And we produce environmental education materials, including Adopting a Stream in Northwest Handbook, Adopting a Wetland in Northwest Guide. Probably the most popular publication is the Streamkeeper's Field Guide, Watershed Inventory and Stream Monitoring Methods. And there's a companion called The Streamkeeper, a video starring Bill Nye the Science Guy. And I've been really fortunate. We've got a wonderful team of ecologists and technicians who spend all their time up a creek teaching local communities how to providing technical assistance on stream wetland restoration to our local communities. We also have developed a wonderful spot, which I'd invite you all to come to visit, called the Northwest Stream Center, which has, well, I tell our visitors, if you come to the Northwest Stream Center, read all the information along our nature trail, which takes you past an outdoor trout stream exhibit with viewing windows onto an elevated boardwalk that went through 25 to 30 acres of North Creek riparian vegetation. If you read everything along the way, you'll pick up a natural science degree worth of information. No pressure for grades or a thesis. And I can guarantee you solitude. is we restrict the access, no more than 5 people on a 15-minute schedule, and it's reservations required. It seems like there's a lot of plant interest here. The skunk cabbage are beginning to poke their heads up at the swamplander viewpoint, and I can guarantee you can go to one of the biggest areas of skunk cabbage without having to wear chest waders or carry a machete at the Northwest Stream Center. You'll be 3 feet above. It's a beautiful place. And I can go on all night, so I think I'll stop. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Tom. We did not talk about how we would like to moderate the question and answer section. Maybe if people wanted to, if you want to type your question into the chat or raise your hand, and then we could call on people to ask questions. I have some questions in case people can't think of a question. Oh, Cody, you have to unmute yourself, please.
Great. My name is Cody Johansson, and I am coming into this conversation from the lands of the Upper Skagit people along the Skagit River. We are fortunate enough to be in this land farming because of a very gracious woman named Michelle, who I found through Seattle Tilth Alliance. And she opened up this farm for my family to come and raise our goats and grow all the vegetables that we would need to survive here, as well as steward about 5 acres of conservation land along the Skagit River. And my question is simply, I'm a former educator. I taught public school for 7 years, and I would really love to be able to share kind of what's going on here in a way that's respectful to the people who lived here. And I would just love to know some experiences with starting a group that has restoration and connection with the land in mind.
That's a really great question. I know that I can't answer how to start an organization. If anyone else would like to provide some input.
So Cody, are you asking how do you go about starting a nonprofit corporation?
I don't know if it's looking into do you start an organization first, or I'm more tending towards starting to work with the land first and then finding out where that fits possibly within an organization that's already working. I have zero skills in connecting people together, but I have lots of skills in teaching and educating, and lots of access to the land and spaces and knowledge to do that sort of teaching. I want to be able to, grow and help other people grow in some organized way.
Well, I have a question for you, Cody, about that. if you start an organization, you also start an avalanche of administrative work, paperwork. It comes with a whole lot of things other than teaching and working with the community. It's a great responsibility, and it is something that my passion is at I love reading. I love being out in the natural world, and I find myself spending time in the office every single week doing something related to the actual organization, making sure that the team can work and the programs are running. So if you really want to focus on the teaching itself, maybe it's best if you actually connect to other organizations who are providing such services and work with them. If you actually want to create something that you believe none of the other organizations out there are tackling, then maybe start an organization on your own. But I think that every one of us here who have started nonprofits or for-profit organizations know that it takes away a lot of time from what your passion actually is, because very few people are passionate about administrative work, writing grants or submitting documentations and proof of certain things all the time. So that's something to consider.
Yeah, I'd like to add also just start a Facebook group if you're on Facebook, like most people are, and you can connect with tons of people in your area that are interested in the same kind of things. I'm a member of multiple groups in Snohomish, King County, and that's a great way to start finding like-minded people.
Jason, please.
Thank you. For me, the constant question for everything is scale. And Cody, we've actually had some great conversations in the past before about scale. There's an excellent book. Oh shoot, I forgot the name of it. Cody, could you put the name of that book in the chat? You know which one I'm talking about, I think. Small is beautiful. I think that's it. So different techniques work at different scales, right? So if the scale is 5 people coming to the farm and it's spread through via like a bulletin board notice at the library or some like local little community organization, totally different scale than if you like partnered with the Audubon Society for some kind of program, right? Totally different scale than if it's like a regional or state nonprofit. So I think for me, when I'm looking at stuff like that, it's really helpful to think about how involved I want to be, how many people there are going to be, and then that makes it much more clear to say, okay, do I need to start, what kind of organization should I approach, and what work do I have to do to make the different, to make it work at the correct scale? Small is beautiful. There we go. Excellent, excellent book. Absolutely marvelous book.
Andrew?
Andrew, yeah.
A question for Tom. I teach high school and we've been involved with wetland restoration. Is there like an archive of case studies with like other high schools, other school groups? It'd be really neat to start networking and just to share work we're doing, and then to see like examples of, you know, projects that have been going on for some time and seeing kind of like the potential of what can be, you know,
Yeah, I'm not aware of an archive of restoration activities done by high school groups. We actually have had high school groups involved in wetland restoration projects. When I say we, the Adopted Stream Foundation. Probably the best example of a restoration project, and perhaps the most accessible, is at the Adopted Stream Foundation's headquarters, the Northwest Stream Center. And there we have restored 3 acres of wetlands from a 4-acre gravel parking lot. That work was initiated back in when we leased that site from Snohomish County back in 1992, and we began excavating the parking lot, which was constructed on top of wetlands, in 1994. And if you were to go out and look at the wetland area that we restored from that parking lot today without knowing that it used to be a parking lot, I'm hoping you would say Mother Nature did a good job with those wetlands. But it's also a project that's continually, it's continuing restoration effort, dealing with all the things that happen. You know, the bane of all stream and wetland restoration projects are invasive plants,
Maintenance,
and you know, a variety of other factors. But we created a single viewscape where you can see 4 of the 5 scientific classifications of wetlands that are found in upland areas at the Northwest Stream Center from a parking lot. So
where's that located?
It's at the south end of Snohomish County's McCullum Park, and 600 128th Street Southeast, Everett 98208. Probably the best thing to just go to streamkeeper.org, which is the Downstream Foundation's website, and there's real clear directions from that website.
Okay, that sounds like a great resource.
Yeah, the Downstream Foundation also restored 6 acres of wetlands from a former parking lot up in the Stillaguamish Basin as well, and then depending on who you speak with, we've also developed and restored hundreds of acres of riparian zone, and that's the area of vegetation next to a stream that affects the stream's ecological health. And much of that riparian zone, I'm on the Department of Ecology's mythical list of wetland scientists, and much of the riparian work that we're doing is in wetlands. So, and hopefully if we get the COVID restrictions, well, if the COVID plague is abating somewhat, we can get volunteers involved with us again. We've got several thousand plants we need to get in the ground next to an 8-acre riparian restoration project that's ongoing on the Middle Fork of Quilceda Creek, north of Marysville, and then another 4-acre riparian restoration project that's going to be on Allen Creek, next to Cool Canines, a dog sitting place. And then we've just struck an agreement with the Tulalip tribes to restore around 4 acres of riparian zone on the West Fork of Quilceda Creek, west of I-5. And we'll be beginning that process this year as well. In the past, we've had hundreds of people involved, all ages, and we love the high school kids, usually because they have stronger backs than everybody else. But they also have a lot of enthusiasm they bring to the mix.
That they do.
So I've got a question. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind as something you do that really predictably makes a light bulb moment for people? Like some kind of experience you walk people through, or something you say where you can see the light bulb go off in somebody's head that they've made a connection about the reality of humanity and nature being together. I want tricks.
Who's the question for?
Anyone who wants to answer.
I'll answer that. With my foraging classes, I see it a lot, especially when you start talking about the trees, and you can gently move away the duff and you can see the mycelium. Most recently, I was out at a client's house, and I took a picture of a tree knuckle, and I showed that to a group of friends. basically a Douglas fir was cut down, and then the Douglas fir sealed off its decay, even though the tree was gone, because of the connection it had with the rest of nature. And when I showed that picture to a group of people, you could see the light bulb, like, this tree should be dead, but it's not dead. There's something going on.
I think I know the picture that you're talking about, where the Douglas fir, the stump is healed over, like the top.
Yep, exactly.
The top of the trunk is covered in bark again.
Yep, and that's because all the roots of the other trees and the mycelium working together was able to block off that decay to protect that stand of forest.
I'll throw in a different example, and I mentioned this to Demarus a few days ago. For a number of years, I've been doing workshops for teachers, teaching them how to teach students to appreciate nature. And Tom Henley, his first name is spelled Thom. We sometimes jokingly call him Thom. And I consider him one of the better environmental educators on the planet, and he's written a number of publications, including Rediscovery Ancient Pathways and New Directions and As If the Earth Matters. And one of the activities that I find is most entertaining for me, and when I have a good time, sort of the kids, is called Camera Kids. And with Camera Kids, you pair up your students in teams of 2, and you give them an assignment. One student is a camera whose eyes, or shutter, if you will, are closed until somebody touches the earlobe, which becomes the shutter and opens the lens. And the other student is photographer, and each photographer is assigned to go out and take 3 pictures that catches their eye, 3 pictures in nature. It can be a mushroom, it could be a dandelion flower, it could be some lush moss or lichens on a tree. And after those 3 images are taken, the camera becomes photographer, and the photographer becomes the camera. And this is an exercise in making observations in nature. It's also an exercise in communication and trust, because if a camera gets walked into a tree, chances are what comes around goes around. So you've got these youngsters going out. One is literally in the blind until their shutter is touched, and then after each photographer takes 3 images, we distribute some IBM cards and colored pencils and request each camera to develop the 3 images that are in their random access memory. When they complete that exercise, the group of photographers and cameras are in a circle, and they distribute the images that they have developed, meaning they have drawn images of what they saw. And the next little exercise is for each photographer to pick out the pictures that they took. And I've done this a bunch of times and never had a photographer who did not pick out the picture they took. And these are really elementary drawings, but they have a vivid image of what they took. So this is like sort of like the light bulb going off. I'm taking a picture of something in nature. I'm going to record that image that I saw, and it sticks in that random access memory. And the concluding exercise in this fun experiential teaching exercise is for the photographers to sign their pictures and then hand them off to their camera. And it's fun to do. The kids all get it, and they want to come back for other activities that we have laid out for them, which I could go on all night about those too, so I won't.
I did want to add that another connection that I just recently had. I've been pruning orchards for a long time, and I have one client that I've been doing it for about 8 years now. And when I started, the trees were horribly butchered, and through the progressive years and proper pruning techniques, I have redeveloped a canopy, a secondary canopy, and a really beautiful tree. And the client came out, and I could show them my pruning cuts, and the result of my pruning cut, like pruning to a bud that's facing outwards versus pruning to a bud that's facing inwards. And it was really refreshing to see that light bulb come off of understanding the physiology of a tree and how they grow.
Yeah, the how they grow. Another recent thing is Brussels sprouts, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people eat or not eat Brussels sprouts. It's one of my favorites. But most of the time when they see it, it's already packaged in some way, or it's at least cut off the stem. And it was really interesting because we actually service, most of the time it's churches, food banks, food pantries, so organizations, but the drivers are coming in. And we received a couple semi-loads of Brussels sprouts on the tree, and started loading it. And he had the list of getting Brussels sprouts. He knew he's gonna get that. And he picked it up, and he was in total disbelief that this is actually the Brussels sprouts. And when he understood that, and he actually started to see how it's now, okay, so it makes sense, it is related to the cabbage, and how all of that is growing together. And then, you know, we talked about how brassicas are such a fun group, and all the different varieties of how you can grow a tasty vegetable. Yeah, those moments, I believe, are real life changing. I know that for him, he now, these guys come back weekly. He now actually is looking at all the different vegetables that he used to eat and gather and restore, but they really look like in a garden. So it's amazing.
I have something to add, if that's okay. Because Jason, I think you're speaking to kind of a transcendental moment that happens to people at different times. But I think the underlying connection between all of them is that it's through exposure. You're in nature and then something happens. And I guess I can speak to that kind of woo-woo area because my introduction was tightly connected to kind of a spiritual awakening. And I had a completely natural, like endogenous awakening, but I know that through psychedelics, a lot of people have experienced this like a oneness. But for me, if I can share my experience, I had a very poignant moment where I was out weeding my yard, and I was gonna just, you know, grab this clump of grass that was growing too close to my vegetables, and all of a sudden I felt the roots of my hair being pulled, and it was as if a consciousness was transferred and realized this was a live being. And it was absolutely profound. I couldn't weed the same way, and that's why I had to look into permaculture, just more holistic ways of treating all the plants. And I have started looking into just plant medicine. I have a book here. It's called The Lost Language of Plants. And if you look into this, you'll realize like the traditional plant medicine women and men, they have plants talk to them and they teach them, you know, what combinations are best for different things. That's how they're able to make all these amazing concoctions, like out of the entire Amazon. You have gazillion species of things, and how did they know like these three would work? And they had this kind of, you know, I can't explain. I have a science background too, so all this is new to me. But when you start to pay attention, you realize that they're plant spirits at work, or something, you know, greater than my understanding.
Thank you for sharing that. That is so awesome, because that actually is connected to one of my favorite light bulb moments to lead people through, that I got from Mike Hogue over in Kalamazoo, Michigan. You can imagine, like, close your eyes and just imagine. And actually, if you want to follow along, this takes like a minute. If you want to actually close your eyes or just listen, but you can close your eyes and visualize the most beautiful possible natural setting that you can imagine. There's a place that's peaceful and gorgeous and full of life, where you feel at home, and there's abundance and just something incredibly beautiful. And then open your eyes and spend some time thinking about what made that so incredible. The things you saw or smelled or felt or hear. And then what's really amazing is, if you have time to really, you know, spend 20 or 30 minutes discussing this as a small group of people, basically everything that anybody ever comes up with is something that relates to ecological health in a way that supports human thriving. Like, often people see a whole range of beautiful flowers. Well, you only get beautiful flowers in healthy, biodiverse environments with like a bunch of food production and medicine production. People often see and feel and hear water. Water is life. You know, we do not have survival unless there's rich water flowing through the landscape. Tom, thank you for everything you're doing for the water. And the birds, like, everything becomes an environmental indicator. And even open space, like if you imagine a meadow with trees dotted through it, in our climate, that's a landscape that only exists with human tending. The Salish peoples here tended incredible camas meadows. They still have the knowledge, and in some little areas that's possible, but most of the Salish people who tended these meadows have been driven off the land, and guess what? The meadows disappear. So it's a gorgeous natural landscape. When we see it, our hearts just sing, and it's only possible because of human beings being part of nature. And when we do that right, it's better for all life, not just us. And when people can take what was in their mind and in their heart, and then open their eyes and connect that to the real world and understand that they actually belong here, we just have to get it right. It's really incredible. And Yuna, thank you for being so open to share about your experiences. And we have such diverse spiritual perspectives on life, but finding a way to connect your own personal spiritual experience to your place in nature just adds a whole level that's so important.
I like your question, Jason. I think it brings up a lot, because I think part of how education works best is when someone discovers something for themselves where they make that connection, right? So I feel like it's kind of hard though, because it's like, how do you teach something and leave just enough out so that they get there on their own? And I think also your question brings up a challenge with nature education is, and this is something I talk about a lot, is that Western science aims to be clinical and value-free, culture-free, all objective, but we're humans. Like, we can't exist in a cultural bubble. We can try as hard as we can, but a lot of those worldviews and values are going to come through, and they're reflected in the questions that are asked and the way things are approached. And I think viewing humans as outside of nature is a big part of the way that Western science views the world. And that's a challenge. That message is bombarded at us all the time. And it kind of drives me nuts when I see the memes where it's like the world without humans is like lush and beautiful, and then the world with humans is degraded and a desert, and like it's you know, it's been exploited. And I don't know, it might probably take a while to learn how do we teach people to look at that worldview and challenge it and like question it every time it comes up and ask, is that true? Are we outside of nature, or are we animals? Like, are we meant to be here? Like, did we really evolve to kill ourselves off and not exist anymore? I don't believe that. One of the things that I like to point out when talking about that we are a part of nature is the fact that everyone carries around about 8 to 12 pounds of bacteria in our body, like, and that the number of bacteria cells, it outweighs, like, there are more bacterial cells than human cells, like numbers wise, right? It's kind of crazy. We have all these tiny creatures that we can't see, like eyebrow mites. Like, we don't know that they're there. They don't hurt us, like, usually. So, and I know that's not the greatest example of like feeling connected to nature is like we have bacteria, but we can't exist without food and without beauty in the landscape and shelter. All of these things that come, they come as gifts from nature. And how I think we need to teach how to view everything as a gift from nature also.
I think that was kind of what was experienced earlier through mushroom medicine. I've had very much experience with that myself. And it's letting go of ego and understanding that we are not special. We are a part of everything as a whole. I had a very similar experience walking through the forest, and the sun was coming through these old growth Douglas firs, and it was a carpet of beautiful moss with ferns everywhere. And I could feel the energy from the plants around me. That was about 15 years ago, and that completely altered my course. It's letting your ego dissolve and understanding that we are a part of nature. And I hope in the future that mushroom medicine is more readily promoted, because it is one of the easiest ways besides meditation to help you let go of that ego of being a human and being superior to nature.
I think the question about how do we relate to science is so central, because science is such a foundational cornerstone of the dominant culture. The way, and I'd love to hear how other people handle this, where how I conceptualize it is that science is a tool, and tools are like, it's a fundamentally human thing to make tools. And we use tools to do inhuman things that we couldn't do as humans. Like, we make axes because we can't chop down a tree with our hands, right? Like, chopping down a tree is inhuman. Chopping up vegetables is inhuman. Like, we make tools to do inhuman things, and that's great when they're kept in their proper perspective. Science lets us see certain things that we can't see otherwise. It's an incredibly powerful tool. And because it's an incredibly powerful tool, we can do incredibly inhuman things with it and get in trouble real fast. So it's like a microscope. A microscope is a tool for looking real close at something, but you only see what you're looking at. So when we can have a holistic perspective, and we can look wisely at a little piece that can help us. And if we think that when we're looking at the little piece, we see everything, we are so hosed. But I would love to hear how other people, if anybody else has thoughts to share on that, because Demarus, I really like that you brought that up.
To me, science is a very important tool, as you said. Yes, it's also something that we reference. I reference it all the time. However, to me, being humble also means that we don't know all of the answers, and there is a whole set of things that we cannot explain, but we always know, we feel it's in us. We have the answers at moments when it doesn't even make sense. And I think it's almost an attitude that being able to say, I might not have an answer, but I know an answer. Being able to walk into spaces and areas, whether it's in real life or it's an emotional field or some other experience, trusting that the next step is there. Those are experiences that they form a character, and they make us very human, but they cannot be explained scientifically. So I think that it's sort of like a spectrum, right? And how the fact that we cannot see certain waves doesn't mean that doesn't exist. And actually, if we put an equipment to it that can receive those, we can start seeing different things other than just our scope. Same with sounds. How long did we think that giraffes are actually mute? And it turns out that they make such a deep sound that our hearing cannot pick it up. So a lot of times I don't think that it's not that it's even not scientific. I just don't think that we are equipped with those physical tools to see something, but we know that it's there. And I always tell people and myself too that just trust that gut feeling. If you feel something is one way, we really cannot go against ourselves. It doesn't work. So that's very inhuman. So yeah, I agree with what you say, Jason. And to me, science is sort of part of life, but life is bigger than that.
I love the point that you're bringing up, Zsofia, because from what I'm hearing from everybody, it's like there's a fundamental shift that needs to occur within a person, and then your relationship with everything else changes. And going back to what Demarus is saying about the bacteria that we harbor, now it's my belief that you can alter your diet to kind of bring about a different kind of awareness. And that's because the bacteria you harbor, let's say you eat a lot of processed food, all the bacteria you have there is going to be geared toward processing that, and it's going to give you signals to eat more of that stuff, whether it's like sweets or, you know, maybe things that's not so good for you. So it's like the cyclical thing that kind of keeps your consciousness kind of, I feel like, suppressed a little bit. But if you start to eat live foods, you harbor a different kind of bacteria, and it's going to alter. I don't know what the actual hormone signalings are, but I'm pretty sure it tells you like, hey, you want a new fresh carrot again instead of like going for like a Twinkies or something. I don't know. That just popped up, and I wanted to share that thought.
I wanted to thank Tom for sharing the camera kids exercise, that's something that I want to try in the future. It sounds like so much fun. It reminded me, I was watching a TV show with my son, he's 11, and he came up with, he said that humans are pattern-seeking creatures. And I think that's true because we're a part of nature, we seek patterns. That was something that he came up with on his own, but I think it's really interesting, the exercise, the way that I'm just imagining the photographer remembering the perspective and what they wanted to focus on, and how interesting it is that that exercise like shows that they remember what they wanted to take a picture of. Like that, I think that's really, really cool. I also wanted to say, I think an important part of feeling connected to nature is feeling a sense of duty or responsibility to live in a good way with nature, to like live in good relationships. I forget exactly why I was bringing that up. Because I guess it's just like, yeah, letting go of ego. I think that like letting go of this wanting to control every little thing is another thing. Also, even I think within teaching, sometimes there are really important ideas that we need to teach, but sometimes also being okay with someone not being ready to learn a certain fact might be a part of the process. The only thing I worry about is like if we need to teach values or ethics, like trying not to drop the ball on those things. And like just like that's why I think certain things are repeated during community gatherings. Is like, this is important, we can't forget this. And it might sound like boring, or because that's just something I always wondered, like why are we talking about this again? But it's because it's so important that we have to keep remembering. So I don't know if anybody had any other questions or any other thoughts.
I'll just mention a couple of things. Back when I was a kid, as I mentioned earlier, I traveled all the time. And when I was in the continental US, I was, one of my constants was spending a week or two at my grandmother's house in Titusville, Pennsylvania. And of course, you guys all know where the first oil well was, right? It was Titusville, Pennsylvania, Drake's Well. And my grandmother had 15 acres, and I used to escape from my parents, my brother, my grandmother, and go down the hill behind on the edge of her property, cross over the railroad tracks, and go swimming in Oil Creek. And the name Oil Creek is a little misleading because it's actually thriving trout stream these days. And I got, I guess one of the thrills of my life was being down there looking at trout and then having this great big salamander swim by me, and I thought it was like a creature of the Black Lagoon suddenly showing up. And it left an amazing impression on me, so I've always carried that with me, and that was kind of one of the things that kind of drove me into doing what I'm doing today. But sadly, most kids these days have connections with nature through their iPhones or their iPads, or occasionally a walk in the woods in a controlled kind of environment. And very rarely do they get to go out and explore on their own and come up with their own experiences like that. And I find that when we bring kids together and introduce them to aquatic insects and freshwater mussels and freshwater clams and crayfish, they start to get that there is other stuff on the planet besides themselves and their own little cliques. And the other thing that I just want to mention, and this is maybe with a bit of urgency, is we have to figure out right away how to accommodate the growing population here and protect the natural resources at the same time. And I think it's really imperative that we get more and more, not just the youth, but the adults aware of how to go about doing that. And I'm in the process of drafting a watershed education experience curriculum geared for high school seniors. And at this juncture, it's going to be limited to no more than 10 students, no fewer than 5. And it'll be located at the Northwest Stream Center, and we'll be using listening devices for social distancing purposes. And we'll be teaching the students what a watershed is, what a riparian zone is, the social, historical, and political characteristics of watersheds. We'll be bringing up the fact that, hey, there was over 500 treaties between the United States government and Native people, all of which were abrogated. And we'll particularly bringing up the treaty issues here in this state, which is actually one of the worst when it came to fighting treaties. And at the end of this exercise, we're going to be challenging the students to complete this 4-hour course with becoming stream keepers, and we're going to offer them pledge cards to consider filling out, and it would be a list of activities that they would take upon themselves to do. And they can be simple things like recycle, reuse, and all that sort of stuff, but also contact your local government elected official and ask him or her if they know what a riparian zone is, and ask them if they would be willing to improve the environmental protection offerings that their city, county, or tribal government has, for that matter. And get them actually involved in doing something, giving them enough background where they feel like they're empowered to take action. And number 1 on my little list on my checklist so far is actually register to vote, and then exercise the rights and responsibilities that come with that. So there's other folks that are doing similar kinds of things. And for those of you who are, Andrew, you're a teacher, I'd recommend that you get in touch with Jeff Hogan of Killer Whale Tales. And he does a wonderful presentation. It's free. And these days he's Zooming it like most of us are. But he's got a great presentation for all different age groups. And Andrew, what grade are you teaching?
I teach AP Biology and AP Environmental Science, so juniors, seniors, and then I teach chemistry. So
great. Yeah. So your students would be perfect candidates for our watershed education experience. But beware, we'll be teaching them not only the environmental rules of the road for Mother Nature, but who are the rules? What are the rules, and who are the rulers when it comes to local politics? And you can't separate the sciences from the local politics. We really have got to get this discussion about protecting the environment in front of the planning commissions, city councils, county councils, and guide them to doing a better job than we have been when it comes to protecting the environment. So I'll close off on that thought. It's food for thought.
Well, we're coming up to 8:30, so I think it's time for us to wrap up our chat. But I wanted to thank all of our panelists and all of our attendees for being here and for having such a great conversation tonight. We recorded tonight's talk, and I'll put the video up on YouTube, and then We will send out the link for tonight's talk, and then also I'll post it in the Facebook event. So hopefully there'll be a way for you to see it and share it. And then for whoever wanted to come and wasn't able to join us tonight, they'll be able to watch the recording.
Thank you so much, Demarus. This was
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks very
Yeah,
much.
thank you to everybody.
Thank you.